A homeless boy saw the guns before anyone else did. Two men, midday, outside a convenience store in Houston. A 12-year-old kid frozen between them. The boy didn't think. He ran, shoved the child behind cover. The second shot rang out. Fragments hit his face. He hit the ground hard. When he tried to open his eyes, one of them wouldn't see anymore. Then he passed out. When the bikers arrived, sirens were already closing in. He didn't know the child was the son of a Hells Angels member. And he had no idea what was waiting for him when he woke up. His name was Gabriel Cortez, 17 years old, weeks away from aging out of the system and living on the streets longer than most people could survive. That morning started like every other: hunger, heat, and the instinct to stay invisible. But when he saw those guns, something inside him refused to look away. He'd been sitting on the curb 2 blocks down, watching the traffic move through the intersection near the convenience store. The sun was high, unforgiving. Sweat clung to his neck. His stomach had been empty since yesterday. He wasn't thinking about food anymore. Just the next hour, the next safe place to rest. That's how you survived. 1 hour at a time. Then he saw the kid, 12 years old, maybe younger. Backpack slung over one shoulder, walking toward the store entrance. Gabriel didn't know his name yet. Didn't know anything about him. But something in the way the boy moved, relaxed, unaware, made Gabriel pause. That's when the two men stepped out of the alley. They moved fast, one tall, wearing a dark hoodie despite the heat, the other shorter, hands shoved into his jacket pockets. Gabriel's instincts kicked in before his mind could catch up. He'd seen this before. He knew what happened next. The shorter man pulled a gun. The boy froze. Gabriel was already running. He didn't think about the danger, didn't think about what could happen to him. He just moved, feet pounding the pavement, breath sharp in his chest. The taller man turned, surprised. The boy stood paralyzed, eyes wide, backpack slipping from his shoulder. Gabriel reached him in seconds, grabbed the boy's arm and shoved him hard behind a metal dumpster near the side of the building. The boy stumbled, hit the wall, but he was out of the line of fire. The first shot exploded through the air. Gabriel ducked instinctively, pulling the boy lower. His heart hammered in his chest. The second man shouted something, angry, panicked. Footsteps scattered across the pavement. Gabriel pressed the boy against the wall, shielding him with his body. Then the second shot came. The sound was deafening. Closer. The bullet struck the brick wall inches from Gabriel's head. Fragments exploded outward, sharp, burning. They tore across his face. Pain flooded through him, white-hot and blinding. His vision blurred. He tried to keep his eyes open, but the left one wouldn't respond. Everything on that side was dark. He hit the ground hard. The boy was screaming. Gabriel could hear it, distant and muffled, like he was underwater. His hands reached for his face, but he couldn't feel anything clearly. Just heat, just pressure. The world tilted sideways. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. The two men ran. Gabriel heard their footsteps fade, heard the boy still shouting for help. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. His head felt heavy, his left eye, he couldn't see anything from it, only darkness. Then he passed out. When the bikers arrived, the scene was already swarming with police and paramedics. A dozen motorcycles pulled up to the curb, engines rumbling low. Men in leather vests stepped off, eyes scanning the crowd. One of them pushed through, tall, broad-shouldered, with graying hair and a patch on his chest that read Hells Angels. His name was Richard Halston, and the boy Gabriel had saved was his son. Richard dropped to his knees beside the paramedics working on Gabriel. His face was pale, his jaw tight. Mason, his son, stood nearby, shaking, tears streaking down his face. A police officer had wrapped a blanket around the boy's shoulders, but Mason couldn't stop staring at Gabriel's unconscious body. "Is he going to be okay?" Richard's voice cracked. One of the paramedics looked up, hesitant. "We need to get him to the hospital, now." They loaded Gabriel onto a stretcher. Richard climbed into the ambulance without asking permission. Mason tried to follow, but another biker, a woman with short dark hair and kind eyes, held him back gently. "Let your dad go with him," she said softly. "We'll meet them there." The ambulance doors slammed shut. Sirens screamed back to life. Richard sat across from Gabriel, watching the paramedics work, checking vitals, stabilizing his head, speaking in clipped medical terms he didn't fully understand. But he understood one thing: This kid, this stranger, had saved his son's life, and it had cost him. Gabriel woke up in pieces. First the sound, steady beeping, muffled voices, the hum of machines. Then the smell, disinfectant, clean sheets, something metallic. His body felt heavy, disconnected. He tried to move, but pain shot through his head, sharp and immediate. He groaned. "Easy." A voice, calm, professional. "Don't move yet." Gabriel tried to open his eyes. The right one responded. Blurry at first, then slowly focusing. White ceiling tiles, fluorescent lights, a hospital room. The left eye didn't open. Panic surged through him. He tried again, forcing it. Nothing, just darkness. His hand moved instinctively toward his face, but someone caught his wrist gently. "Don't touch it." Gabriel turned his head too fast. Pain flared again, but he saw the man now, older, maybe 50, wearing a white coat. A doctor. His expression was serious, but not unkind. "Where?" Gabriel's voice came out rough, broken. He swallowed, tried again. "Where am I?" "Memorial Hermann Hospital. You were brought in 3 hours ago." The doctor pulled a chair closer, sat down. "My name is Dr. Evan Marshall. You've been through a lot, Gabriel." Gabriel's breath hitched. "My Doctor..." Marshall exhaled slowly. He looked tired, like he'd had this conversation too many times before. "The fragments from the bullet hit your face," he said quietly. "They caused significant trauma to your left eye. We did everything we could, but..." He paused. "The damage was too severe. We couldn't save it." The words hung in the air. Gabriel stared at him. His mind refused to process it at first. Couldn't save it. He blinked. Only his right eye responded. The left side of his vision was gone. Empty. A void where the world used to be. "You're telling me I'm blind?" His voice shook. "In one eye?" "Yes." Gabriel turned his head away. He didn't want the doctor to see his face. Didn't want anyone to see the way his chest was tightening, the way his throat was closing up. He was 17. He'd survived the streets, survived the system, survived being invisible for so long. And now this. He'd lost half his sight, saving someone he didn't even know. The door opened. Gabriel didn't turn to look. "Gabriel," Dr. Marshall said gently, "there's someone here who wants to see you." Gabriel still didn't move. Footsteps approached. Slow, hesitant. Then a voice. Deep, rough, weighted with something Gabriel couldn't name. "Hey." Gabriel finally turned his head. A man stood at the foot of the bed. Tall, broad, wearing a leather vest with a patch Gabriel recognized even through his blurred vision. Hell's Angels. The man's face was lined with age and worry. His eyes were red. "My name's Richard Halston," the man said. "That boy you saved, Mason, he's my son." Gabriel didn't respond. Richard stepped closer. His jaw worked like he was trying to find the right words. "I don't know how to thank you for what you did. I don't even know if I can." Gabriel looked away. "I didn't ask for this." "I know." Richard's voice cracked. "But you did it anyway." Silence filled the room. Dr. Marshall stood, excused himself quietly, and left them alone. Richard sat down in the chair the doctor had vacated. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "Mason told me everything. He said you didn't even hesitate. Just ran." Gabriel's throat tightened. He didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to think about it. All he wanted was to go back to this morning, when he was invisible, when no one knew his name, when his biggest problem was finding his next meal. Now everything had changed. "I'm sorry this happened to you," Richard said quietly, "but I need you to know something." He paused. "You're not alone. Not anymore." Gabriel finally looked at him. His right eye, the only one that worked now, searched Richard's face for some kind of trick, some hidden angle. But all he saw was sincerity and guilt. "We're going to take care of you," Richard continued. "The club, me, my family. You saved my son's life, Gabriel. That means something to us. That means everything." Gabriel wanted to tell him he didn't need help, wanted to say he'd be fine on his own like he always had been, but the words wouldn't come, because the truth was, he had no idea how to survive this. No idea how to live with half his vision gone. No idea what came next. Richard stood. He pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper, and placed it on the table beside the bed. "That's my number. When you're ready to leave here, you call me. We'll figure this out together." He turned toward the door, then stopped. "You gave my son a future, Gabriel. Now let us give you one." The door closed softly behind him. Gabriel stared at the ceiling. His right eye burned. His left eye saw nothing. And for the first time in years, he didn't know whether to feel grateful or terrified. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know yet, was that this was only the beginning. Before we continue, tell me from which city and country you're watching. Stories like this reach farther than we imagine. The hospital became Gabriel's world for the next 5 days. He didn't want it to be. He wanted to leave, walk out the door, disappear back into the streets, where at least he understood the rules. But the doctors wouldn't let him go, not yet. Not until they were certain the infection risk had passed. Not until they'd taught him how to navigate with half his vision gone. So he stayed. And every day, the bikers came. At first, it was just Richard. He'd show up in the mornings, bringing coffee Gabriel didn't ask for and sitting in the chair by the window. He didn't talk much, just sat there reading the news on his phone or watching the TV mounted on the wall, like he was keeping watch. Gabriel didn't understand it. "You don't have to be here," Gabriel said on the second day. Richard looked up from his phone. "I know." "Then why are you?" Richard set the phone down. He leaned back in the chair, exhaling slowly. "Because my son is alive because of you, and because you don't have anyone else." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "I don't need anyone." "Maybe not," Richard said quietly. "But you've got us anyway." On the third day, Mason came. Gabriel heard him before he saw him. Quick footsteps in the hallway, a woman's voice trying to slow him down. Then the door opened, and the boy appeared. 12 years old, backpack still slung over one shoulder, eyes wide and nervous. Richard stood. "Mason!" But the boy was already moving toward the bed. He stopped a few feet away, clutching the straps of his backpack like a lifeline. His eyes locked on Gabriel's face, on the bandages covering the left side. "Hi," Mason said. His voice was small. Gabriel didn't respond. Mason swallowed. "I'm Mason. I wanted to come sooner, but they said I had to wait until—" He stopped, looked down. "I wanted to say thank you." Gabriel turned his head toward the window. "You already did." "No, I didn't." Mason's voice cracked. "I didn't say anything. I was too scared, but I'm saying it now." He paused. "Thank you for saving my life." Gabriel closed his right eye. He didn't want to have this conversation, didn't want the kid's gratitude or his father's guilt or any of it. He just wanted to go back to being invisible. But Mason wasn't finished. "I drew something for you," the boy said. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his backpack, stepped closer, and placed it on the bed. "I'm not very good, but—" Gabriel opened his eye. He looked at the paper, then slowly he unfolded it. It was a drawing, rough, childish, done in colored pencils. A figure standing in the middle, tall, wearing a simple shirt and jeans, and on the figure's face one eye was shaded dark. The other glowed bright like a star. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, "You saved me. Now you can't disappear." Gabriel stared at it. His throat tightened. Mason shifted his weight. "I know it's not good." "It's fine," Gabriel said quietly. Mason smiled, small, uncertain. Then Richard put a hand on his shoulder, and they left. Gabriel held the drawing for a long time after they were gone. The news broke on the 4th day. Gabriel didn't see it at first. He didn't watch TV, didn't check the internet, but the nurses did. And by the time Richard arrived that afternoon, the story had already spread across Houston. Homeless teen saves Hell's Angel's son, loses eye in heroic act. Gabriel saw the headline on Richard's phone. His stomach dropped. "They're calling you a hero," Richard said carefully. Gabriel looked away. "I'm not. The whole city thinks you are. I don't care what they think." But he did. He cared more than he wanted to admit, because now he wasn't invisible anymore. Now people knew his name, knew his face, knew what had happened to him, and that terrified him. By evening, the hospital staff had started treating him differently. The nurses smiled more. A doctor he'd never met stopped by to shake his hand. Someone left flowers outside his door with a card that read, "Thank you for your courage." Gabriel wanted to throw them away. On the 5th day, the club arrived. Richard showed up early, but he wasn't alone. 6 other bikers walked into the room, men and women, all wearing the same patch. They filled the space with their presence, their leather vests creaking as they moved. Gabriel tensed. One of the women stepped forward. She was older, maybe 40, with short dark hair and a calm, steady gaze. She'd been there the day of the shooting, the one who'd held Mason back. "I'm Laura," she said, "Richard's sister." Gabriel nodded. She gestured to the others. "This is the club. We wanted to meet you properly." Gabriel didn't know what to say. He just sat there, bandages still covering half his face, feeling exposed under their stares. One of the men, bald with a thick beard, spoke up. "We heard what you did, kid. That took guts." Another nodded. "Not many people would have run toward those guns." Gabriel's chest tightened. "I didn't think about it." "That's what makes it brave," Laura said softly. Richard stepped forward, his expression serious. "We talked it over, as a club." He paused. "We're covering your medical bills." "All of them?" Gabriel blinked. "What?" "The surgery, the hospital stay, the follow-up care, everything. You're not paying a cent." "I can't," Gabriel's voice broke. "I can't pay you back." "We're not asking you to," Richard said firmly. "This isn't a loan. It's what's right." One of the other bikers pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it to Richard. Richard placed it on the table beside Gabriel's bed. "There's $5,000 in there," Richard said. "For clothes, food, whatever you need when you get out of here. We're also setting you up with a place to stay, temporary, until you figure out what's next." Gabriel stared at the envelope. His hands were shaking. "Why?" he whispered. Richard met his eyes. "Because you gave us something we can never repay, but we're going to try anyway." That night, after the bikers left, Gabriel couldn't sleep. He lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling with his one working eye. The envelope sat on the table unopened. The drawing from Mason was folded beside it. And for the first time in years, Gabriel didn't know what to feel. He'd spent so long surviving on his own, moving through the world like a ghost, taking what he needed, staying out of sight. No one had ever cared where he went or what happened to him. That's just how it was. But now, everything had changed. These people, these bikers, they saw him. They knew his name. They were offering him help he didn't ask for, giving him things he didn't know how to accept. And it scared him more than the streets ever did. Because what if he wasn't worth it? What if he took their help and failed? What if they realized he was just some broken kid who didn't belong anywhere? He turned his head toward the window. The city lights glowed in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were moving through their lives, unaware of him, the way it used to be. But he wasn't invisible anymore, and he didn't know if that was a gift or a curse. The next morning, Dr. Marshall came by for the final check. He removed the bandages carefully, examining the healing tissue around Gabriel's left eye. Gabriel didn't look in the mirror. He didn't want to see it yet. "The swelling's going down," Dr. Marshall said. "The scarring will fade over time, but you'll always have some. That's unavoidable." Gabriel nodded. "I need to talk to you about what comes next," the doctor continued. He pulled the chair closer, sat down. "You're going to have to adjust. Your depth perception is going to be off for a while. You'll have blind spots on your left side. It's going to take time to learn how to move through the world this way." "How long?" "Months, maybe longer. Everyone's different." Dr. Marshall paused. "But you're young. Your brain will adapt. It just won't be easy." Gabriel exhaled slowly. "Nothing ever is." Dr. Marshall gave him a small, sad smile. "No, it's not." He stood, handed Gabriel a folder filled with follow-up instructions and referrals. "Richard told me he's setting you up with a place to stay. That's good. You'll need stability while you recover." Gabriel took the folder. "Yeah." The doctor hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth, Gabriel, you did something incredible. Not everyone would have done that." Gabriel didn't respond. After the doctor left, Gabriel finally looked at the envelope on the table. He picked it up, felt the weight of it. $5,000, more money than he'd ever had in his life. He opened it. The bills were crisp, neatly stacked. Real. And for the first time since he woke up in this hospital, Gabriel let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, something had changed. But he didn't know that by tomorrow, everything he feared would come knocking again. Tell me, would you have done the same if you were in his place? The apartment wasn't much, one bedroom, a small kitchen, a couch that had seen better days, but it had 4 walls, a door that locked, and a bed. For Gabriel, it was more than he'd had in years. Richard had arranged it. A club member owned the building and they'd cleared out the unit on the 2nd floor. No rent for the first 3 months. After that, they'd figure something out. Gabriel stood in the doorway that first day, holding a duffel bag filled with clothes the bikers had bought him, and couldn't bring himself to step inside. "It's yours," Richard said from behind him. No strings. Gabriel finally walked in. The space felt too big, too quiet. He set the bag down on the couch and turned in a slow circle, his right eye taking in every detail. His left side remained dark, an empty void he still wasn't used to. "You need anything, you call me," Richard said. He handed Gabriel a phone. "It's prepaid. My number's already in there, Laura's too, and Mason's been asking if he can text you." Gabriel took the phone. "Okay." Richard lingered at the door. "We're having a cookout at the clubhouse this weekend. You should come." Gabriel nodded, but he had no intention of going. After Richard left, Gabriel sat on the couch and stared at the blank wall across from him. The silence pressed down like a weight. He'd spent so long on the streets, surrounded by noise, by people, by constant movement, that being alone like this felt wrong, suffocating. He pulled out the drawing Mason had given him, the figure with one glowing eye. "You can't disappear." Gabriel folded it back up and shoved it in his pocket. The first week was the hardest. Gabriel tried to adjust. He practiced walking through the apartment, learning where the blind spots were on his left side. He knocked over a glass on the counter because he didn't see it. He misjudged the distance to the doorframe and hit his shoulder. Every mistake felt like proof that he was broken. Laura stopped by on the 3rd day. She brought groceries, milk, bread, eggs, things Gabriel didn't know how to cook. She unpacked them in the kitchen while Gabriel sat at the small table, watching. "You settling in?" she asked. "Yeah." She glanced at him. "You're a terrible liar." Gabriel looked away. Laura sat down across from him. "It's going to take time, Gabriel. No one expects you to be fine overnight." "I'm fine. You're not." Her voice was firm but not unkind. "And that's okay." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "All of it. The apartment, the money, the—" He gestured vaguely. "Why do you care?" Laura leaned back in her chair. "Because Richard's my brother, and Mason's my nephew, and you saved his life." She paused. "But also because I've seen what happens to kids like you when no one gives them a chance. I'm not letting that happen to you." Gabriel didn't know what to say. Laura stood. "The club's meeting tonight. You should come." "I don't belong there." "Maybe not yet," she said. "But you could." That night, Gabriel didn't go to the meeting. He stayed in the apartment, pacing the small space like a caged animal. His left side kept disappearing, objects he didn't see, corners he didn't judge right. The frustration built until he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed the duffel bag, thought about leaving, just walking out the door and going back to what he knew. But then his phone buzzed. It was a text from Mason. Just 3 words. "Are you okay?" Gabriel stared at the screen. He typed back, "Yeah." The response came fast. "Good. My dad says you're coming to the cookout. I'm excited." Gabriel set the phone down. He didn't reply. At the clubhouse, the meeting had just ended. The bikers gathered in the main hall, a dozen men and women, some leaning against the bar, others sitting at the long wooden tables. Richard stood near the front, arms crossed, listening as one of the older members spoke. His name was Carl, 60, grey beard, skeptical eyes. "I'm just saying," Carl continued, "we don't know this kid. We're throwing a lot at him. Money, housing, support. What if he takes it and runs?" Laura stepped forward. "He's not going to run." "You don't know that." "I do." Her voice was sharp. "Because I've talked to him. He's scared, Carl, not greedy. There's a difference." Another biker, younger, tattooed, chimed in. He saved Mason's life. Doesn't that mean something? It means he did something brave, Carl said. Doesn't mean he's one of us. Richard's voice cut through the room. Enough! Everyone turned. Richard stepped forward, his expression hard. Gabriel didn't ask for any of this. He didn't ask to lose his eye. Didn't ask for the news to plaster his face everywhere. Didn't ask for us to show up at his hospital room. He paused. But we did, because it was the right thing to do. Carl frowned. I'm not saying it wasn't. Then stop questioning it, Richard said firmly. He's under our protection now, that's final. The room fell silent. Laura caught Richard's eye and nodded. Gabriel didn't sleep that night. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. He kept thinking about the bikers, about Richard and Laura and the others, about the way they looked at him like he was something worth saving. It didn't make sense. He'd spent his whole life being nothing. No family, no home, no future. Just a kid the system forgot. And now suddenly people cared. They knew his name. They were investing in him. And it terrified him. Because what if he let them down? What if he couldn't adjust? What if he took their help and still ended up back on the streets? What if he wasn't strong enough to be the person they thought he was? His phone buzzed again. Another text from Mason. Can I visit tomorrow? Gabriel stared at the message. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He wanted to say no. Wanted to tell the kid to leave him alone, to stop trying so hard. But he didn't. He typed, sure. Mason showed up the next afternoon. He knocked on the door and Gabriel opened it to find the boy standing there with a backpack and a nervous smile. Richard was behind him, hands in his pockets. He's been asking all morning, Richard said. Gabriel stepped aside. Come in. Mason walked in carefully, looking around the apartment like it was something important. He set his backpack on the couch and turned to Gabriel. Do you like it here? Gabriel shrugged. It's fine. My dad said you haven't been to the clubhouse yet. I've been busy. Mason tilted his head. Doing what? Gabriel didn't have an answer. Richard cleared his throat. I'm going to wait in the truck. Mason, 30 minutes. Okay. The door closed. Mason sat on the couch, and Gabriel stayed standing, unsure what to do. The kid pulled a notebook from his backpack and flipped it open. I've been drawing more, Mason said. He held up a page, another sketch, this one of a motorcycle. My dad's teaching me about bikes. I want to ride one day. Gabriel nodded. That's cool. Mason looked up at him. Do you want to ride one? I don't know. The boy set the notebook down. You saved my life, you know. Gabriel's chest tightened. You already said that. I know. But I don't think you believe me. Mason's voice was quiet. I was really scared that day. I thought I was going to die. But then you were there. And you didn't even know me. Gabriel looked away. It doesn't matter. It does, Mason said firmly. Because now you're here. And I don't want you to disappear. Gabriel's throat closed. He turned toward the window, blinking hard. The kid didn't understand. Didn't know what it felt like to be a burden, to take things you didn't earn, to owe people more than you could ever give back. I'm not a hero, Gabriel said quietly. I think you are. Gabriel didn't respond. Mason stood, picked up his backpack. My dad's waiting, but I'll come back, okay? Gabriel nodded. After the boy left, Gabriel sat on the couch and put his head in his hands. He wanted to believe Mason, wanted to believe Richard and Laura and all of them. But the voice in his head, the one that had kept him alive for so long, kept whispering the same thing over and over. You don't belong here, you never will. That night the club gathered again. Richard stood at the head of the table, looking at the faces around him. Laura sat to his right. Carl was across from her, arms crossed. We need to talk about Gabriel, Richard said. Carl sighed. Again? Yes, again. Richard's voice was firm. Because some of you still don't get it. This isn't charity. This isn't about feeling good. This is about loyalty. Laura nodded. He put himself between a gun and a 12-year-old boy. He didn't think, he just acted. That's the kind of person we protect. One of the younger bikers spoke up. So, what are we saying? He's family now? Richard met his eyes. If he wants to be. Carl leaned forward. And if he doesn't? Then we still take care of him, Richard said, because that's what we do. The room was silent. Then Laura stood. I'm going to check on him tomorrow, see how he's doing. Anyone have a problem with that? No one spoke. She nodded. Good. Back in the apartment, Gabriel lay awake again. His phone was on the nightstand, the screen dark. He thought about texting Richard. Thought about saying thank you, or asking what came next, or admitting that he didn't know how to do any of this. But he didn't. Instead, he pulled out Mason's drawing again, the figure with one glowing eye. You can't disappear. Gabriel stared at it for a long time, and for the first time since the shooting he let himself wonder, what if the kid was right? That night, a single decision would change the club forever. If you believe no one should face fear alone, like this video and tell us, what would you have done? Gabriel stood outside the clubhouse for 10 minutes before he knocked. It was Saturday afternoon. The cookout Richard had mentioned. Gabriel could hear voices inside. Laughter, the clink of bottles, music playing low. He told himself he wasn't coming. Told himself all week that he didn't belong here, that showing up would only make things worse. But then Mason had texted again that morning, please come, and Gabriel couldn't say no. He knocked. The door opened. Laura stood there, surprise flickering across her face before she smiled. You came. Gabriel nodded. She stepped aside. Come on in. The clubhouse was bigger than he expected. Long wooden tables, a bar along one wall, photos and patches covering every surface. A dozen bikers were scattered around, some playing pool, others sitting at the tables with drinks. The smell of grilled meat drifted in from the back. Conversation stopped when Gabriel walked in. He froze. Every eye in the room turned toward him. His chest tightened. He wanted to turn around and leave. Then Richard appeared, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He clapped a hand on Gabriel's shoulder. Glad you made it. Gabriel managed a nod. Richard raised his voice. Everyone, this is Gabriel Cortez. Silence held for another beat. Then one of the bikers, the younger one with the tattoos, raised his beer. Good to meet you, man. Others followed, nods, small smiles, not all of them, but enough. Laura appeared at Gabriel's side. Come on, I'll introduce you. The afternoon passed slower than Gabriel expected. Laura walked him around, introducing him to the members. Some were friendly, others were polite but distant. Carl, the older biker who'd questioned him at the meeting, gave him a long look but said nothing. Mason found him within 20 minutes. The boy lit up when he saw Gabriel, dragging him outside to where the grill was set up. Richard was flipping burgers, talking with a few other members. You actually came, Mason said, grinning. Yeah. I told my dad you would. Gabriel glanced at Richard, who caught his eye and nodded. No words, just acknowledgement. Mason handed him a soda. You want to see my dad's bike? Sure. They walked to the edge of the lot where the motorcycles were parked in neat rows. Mason stopped in front of a black Harley, running his hand along the handlebar like it was sacred. This is his, Mason said. He's had it for 10 years. Says I can ride it when I'm older. Gabriel studied the bike. The chrome reflected the afternoon sun. The leather seat was worn but cared for. It looked solid, permanent. You ever ridden one? Mason asked. No. My dad says it's freedom. Like nothing else matters when you're on the road. Mason looked up at him. Maybe he'll teach you. Gabriel didn't respond. He couldn't picture himself on a bike. Couldn't picture himself as part of this world. But standing here, next to this kid who kept refusing to let him disappear, he wanted to believe it was possible. The sun was setting when Dr. Marshall showed up. Gabriel was sitting at one of the tables, picking at a plate of food, when he saw the doctor walk in. Marshall wasn't wearing his white coat, just jeans and a button-down. He scanned the room, spotted Richard, and walked over. They talked quietly for a moment. Then Richard turned and gestured toward Gabriel. Dr. Marshall approached. Gabriel, didn't expect to see you here. Yeah. The doctor pulled out a chair and sat down. How are you adjusting? Fine. Marshall gave him a look. Really? Gabriel set his fork down. It's hard. I know. The doctor leaned forward. That's actually why I'm here. I wanted to talk to you about your follow-up care. Gabriel tensed. What about it? There's a procedure, a prosthetic eye. It won't restore your vision, but it would help with appearance, with balance. Some patients find it makes the adjustment easier. He paused. It's expensive, around $12,000. Gabriel's stomach dropped. I don't have that. I know, Marshall said gently. But Richard called me this week. The club wants to cover it. Gabriel stared at him. What? They've already talked to the hospital. They're setting up the payment plan. If you want the procedure, it's yours. Gabriel couldn't breathe. $12,000. For him. For something he didn't even ask for. Why would they do that? Dr. Marshall smiled faintly. Because they care about you, Gabriel, whether you believe it or not. That night, after most of the members had left, Gabriel found Richard sitting alone on the back porch. The older man was nursing a beer, staring out at the empty lot. Gabriel hesitated, then stepped outside. Can I talk to you? Richard looked up. Always. Gabriel sat down on the steps. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Dr. Marshall told me, Gabriel said finally, about the procedure. Richard nodded. Yeah, I can't pay you back. We're not asking you to. Gabriel's hands clenched. Why are you doing this? Richard set his beer down. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. You want the truth? Yeah. Because when I saw you on that pavement bleeding, half-conscious, I thought we'd lost you. I thought my son was going to have to live knowing someone died saving him. Richard's voice was rough. But you didn't die. You survived. And now you're here trying to figure out how to live with what happened, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let you do that alone. Gabriel's throat tightened. You gave Mason a future, Richard continued. Now let us give you one. Gabriel looked down at his hands. I don't know how to be part of this. None of us did at first. Richard stood, walked over, and sat beside him. Family isn't something you're born into, Gabriel. It's something you choose, and we're choosing you. Gabriel's chest ached. He wanted to argue, wanted to say he wasn't worth it, that they were making a mistake. But the words wouldn't come, because for the first time in his life, he wanted to believe them. The weeks that followed changed everything. Gabriel went through with the procedure. Dr. Marshall performed it at the hospital, and the club covered every cent. The prosthetic eye didn't restore his vision, but it helped. The balance improved. The stares from strangers lessened. He started to feel less like a broken thing. Richard set him up with a job at a garage owned by one of the club members. It wasn't much, sweeping floors, organizing tools, but it was steady. Gabriel showed up every day, learned the work, and didn't complain. Laura checked in twice a week. Sometimes she brought food. Other times, she just sat with him, talking about nothing and everything. She told him about her own life, about losing her husband years ago, about how the club had kept her grounded. She never pushed, just listened when Gabriel needed to talk and stayed quiet when he didn't. Mason visited almost every weekend. He'd bring his drawings, his homework, stories from school. And slowly Gabriel stopped pulling away. He started asking questions, started caring about the kid's life, started letting himself be someone Mason looked up to. The club noticed. At the next meeting, Carl stood and addressed the room. I was wrong about the kid, he said bluntly. He's proving himself. He shows up. He works. He's not running. He looked at Richard. You were right. Richard didn't gloat. He just nodded. Laura smiled. 3 months after the shooting, Gabriel stood in the clubhouse again. But this time it was different. This time he wasn't a stranger. The members greeted him by name. They asked how the job was going. They invited him to sit with them. And when Richard called a meeting, Gabriel was told to stay. The club gathered around the main table. Richard stood at the head. We're here to make something official, Richard said. He looked at Gabriel. You've been through hell, kid. And you've handled it better than most people would. You've earned our respect. You've earned our loyalty. Gabriel's heart pounded. Richard pulled something from his pocket. A patch. Not the full Hells Angels patch, but a smaller one. A rocker that read, Under Protection. This means your family, Richard said. You're not a member yet. That takes time if you even want it, but you're under our wing. Anyone messes with you, they mess with us. He handed the patch to Gabriel. Gabriel took it, his hands shaking. He stared at the stitched fabric, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. "Thank you," he whispered. Richard gripped his shoulder. "You don't have to thank us. You're one of ours now." The room erupted in nods and murmurs of agreement. Laura stood and hugged him. Mason, sitting in the corner with a grin, gave him a thumbs up. Gabriel held the patch tight, blinking hard against the burn in his right eye. He'd spent 17 years invisible, unwanted. Forgotten, but not anymore. From that moment on, he was no longer an outsider, but what the doctor revealed next shocked them all. 3 years later. Gabriel stood in front of a room full of teenagers, his hands in his pockets, his prosthetic eye barely noticeable unless you knew to look for it. The room was quiet, 30 kids sitting in folding chairs, some slouched, some attentive, all of them waiting. This was a youth shelter in Austin. Gabriel had been here before. He came once a month now, sometimes more. Always the same speech, always the same truth. He took a breath. "My name is Gabriel Cortez," he began, "and 3 years ago I was homeless." A few kids shifted in their seats. One leaned forward. "I lived on the streets of Houston for 2 years. No family, no plan, just surviving. Day by day." He paused. "I thought that's all I'd ever do. Survive. I didn't think I deserved more than that." He walked slowly across the front of the room, his gaze sweeping over the faces. "Then one afternoon I saw something I couldn't ignore. 2 men with guns. A kid caught in the middle. And I made a choice." He stopped. "I didn't think about it. I just ran." The room was silent now. "I saved that kid's life, but it cost me." Gabriel gestured toward his left eye. "Fragments from a bullet hit my face. I lost my vision in this eye, and when I woke up in the hospital, I thought my life was over." One of the girls in the front row blinked hard, her jaw tight. "I thought I'd lost everything," Gabriel continued, "but I was wrong." His voice softened. "Because the father of that boy, he was part of a motorcycle club, the Hells Angels. And instead of walking away, they stayed. They paid my medical bills, gave me a place to live, gave me a job, gave me a family." He let the words settle. "I'm not telling you this to say everything works out. I'm telling you because I want you to know. Someone will see you, someone will care, you just have to hold on long enough to let them." After the talk, a few kids approached him. One boy, maybe 15, skinny, bruises on his arms, stood off to the side until the others left. Then he stepped forward. "Did you really lose your eye?" he asked quietly. Gabriel nodded. "Yeah." "Does it still hurt?" "Sometimes. Not the eye, but the memory." Gabriel met the boy's eyes. "What's your name?" "David." "You got somewhere to go tonight, David?" The boy hesitated. "I'll figure it out." Gabriel pulled a card from his wallet, his contact info, along with the number for the shelter's coordinator. "You call this number if you need help, or you call me, okay?" David took the card, stared at it. "Why do you care?" Gabriel smiled faintly. "Because someone cared about me when I didn't think I was worth it. Now it's my turn." The boy nodded and walked away. Gabriel watched him go, feeling the weight of it, the responsibility, the hope, the fear that he wouldn't be enough. But he'd learned over the last 3 years that fear was just part of the work. You did it anyway. That evening, Gabriel drove back to Houston. The apartment the club had given him was gone now. He'd moved into a small house 2 years ago, nothing fancy, but it was his. He'd graduated from the community college last spring with a degree in social work. The club had thrown him a party. Mason had made a banner that read, "Congrats, Gabriel," in uneven letters. Gabriel pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a moment, staring at the house. It still didn't feel real sometimes. The stability, the quiet, the fact that he had a future. His phone buzzed, a text from Richard. "Cookout tomorrow. You coming?" Gabriel smiled and typed back, "Yeah, I'll be there." He got out of the car and walked inside. The house was small but warm. Photos lined the walls now. Pictures of him and Mason, him and Laura, him standing with the club at various events. In the corner of the living room, framed and hung with care, was the drawing Mason had made in the hospital 3 years ago. The figure with one glowing eye. You can't disappear. Gabriel stood in front of it, his reflection faint in the glass. He touched the frame lightly. "I didn't," he whispered. The next day, the cookout was in full swing. The clubhouse was packed. Music played from the speakers, kids ran around the yard, and the smell of grilled food filled the air. Gabriel arrived just after noon, and Mason spotted him immediately. The kid was 15 now, taller, voice deeper, but still the same bright-eyed boy who'd refused to let Gabriel fade away. "Gabriel," Mason jogged over, grinning. "You're late? Traffic?" "Sure." Mason rolled his eyes. "Come on. My dad wants to talk to you." They walked through the crowd together. Gabriel greeted the members as he passed. Laura, Carl, others whose names had become as familiar as his own. They weren't just a club anymore. They were family. Richard was standing near the grill, flipping burgers with the same focus he gave everything. He looked up when Gabriel approached and smiled. "There he is. Here I am." Richard handed the spatula to another member and stepped aside. "Walk with me." They moved to the edge of the lot, away from the noise. Richard stopped near the bikes, hands in his pockets. "I wanted to tell you something," Richard said. "Mason's applying to colleges next year." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? That's great. He wants to study medicine, wants to be a doctor." Richard's voice was thick with pride. "Says it's because of you, because of what you went through. He wants to help people the way you were helped." Gabriel's chest tightened. "He said that?" "Every chance he gets." Richard looked at him. "You changed his life, Gabriel, more than you know." Gabriel didn't know what to say. He looked out at the lot, at the rows of motorcycles gleaming in the sun, at the people gathered in the yard. His people. "You changed mine too," Gabriel said quietly. Richard gripped his shoulder. "I know." A month later, Gabriel stood on a stage in Dallas. It was a youth advocacy event. Hundreds of people in the audience, most of them social workers, volunteers, former foster kids. Gabriel had been invited to speak, to share his story, to give hope to people who needed it. He stood at the podium looking out at the crowd. The lights were bright, but he could still see faces, could still feel the weight of their attention. Behind him, projected on a screen, was the photo of Mason's drawing, the figure with one glowing eye. Gabriel began. 3 years ago, I lost half my vision saving a stranger's life, and I thought that loss would define me forever." He paused. "But I was wrong." The room was silent. What I lost that day wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning, because the people who found me, who took me in, who refused to let me disappear, they taught me something I'd never believed before. His voice steadied. They taught me that I mattered. He glanced at the screen, at the drawing. I spent most of my life invisible. No family, no home, no future. And then, in one moment, everything changed. Not because I saved someone, but because they saved me. His throat tightened, but he kept going. "I'm here today because a motorcycle club decided I was worth fighting for. Because a 12-year-old boy refused to let me give up. Because people I didn't know chose to see me when I couldn't see myself." He looked out at the audience. "So if you're listening to this and you feel invisible, if you think no one cares, if you think you're not worth saving, I need you to hear me. You are. You matter. And someone out there is waiting to prove it to you. You just have to hold on long enough to let them." The applause started slowly, then built. People stood. Gabriel saw tears on some faces, nods on others. He stepped back from the podium, his heart pounding. As he walked off the stage, he saw them. Richard, Laura, Mason, and a few other members of the club sitting in the back row. They'd driven 3 hours to be here. Mason was grinning, holding up his phone like he'd recorded the whole thing. Gabriel smiled. That night back in Houston, Gabriel sat on his porch. The street was quiet, the air was cool. He held a cup of coffee and stared out at the neighborhood, modest houses, parked cars, porch lights glowing softly. This was his life now, stable, purposeful, full. His phone buzzed. A text from David, the boy from the Austin shelter. "I called the number. They're helping me. Thank you." Gabriel typed back. "Proud of you. Keep going." He set the phone down and closed his eyes. For a moment he let himself remember the sound of the gunshot, the pain, the fear, the darkness, and then the hands that pulled him back, the voices that refused to let him fall. He thought about Mason's drawing, about the glowing eye. He thought about Richard's words, Family isn't something you're born into. It's something you choose. And he thought about the life he had now, the work he did, the people he helped, the second chance he'd been given. Gabriel opened his eyes. One eye saw the world in front of him. The other held the memory of the day everything changed, and for the first time in his life he understood. He hadn't lost anything that day. He'd finally learned to see. If this story touched you, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. You're part of this family now. Sometimes the people who save others are the ones who needed saving most.